Alrighty, as promised, following the 5 things that Honkai Star Rail does better than Genshin, we're here with the short-awaited sequel, 5 things Genshin does better than Star Rail. If you missed the first episode, feel free to watch it after this one. Doesn't really matter which one you watch first, just kinda make sure you watch both on the off chance you find that I'm being unfairly biased towards one or the other. Something that came to mind after finishing the first video was the risk of new game honeymoon phase affecting my decision making for the video. Honeymoon phase is something to consider. When you start a new game, you tend to enjoy the novelty of it and overlook the more subtle problems and issues of the game. But even after going through it, I feel like most if not everything I said wasn't embellished or gratuitous, so I think we're good to go. I have a good amount of stuff to talk about this time around, so let's not waste any more time and get started. Above all else, the single most defining aspect of Genshin Impact that by leaps and bounds will overshadow Honkai Star Rail now or ever is overworld exploration. It's not even a contest. To this day, the amount of detail, effort, and attention put into Genshin's overworld exploration matches or exceeds that of other big box open world games, which is especially impressive given that it's designed to be playable on mobile devices. Not saying its graphics are cream of the crop, but it's quite an achievement for there to be such depth and richness in Genshin's world. Even beyond the general experience, I feel like the surrounding environments have more weight to them than those in Star Rail. It could just be that we've only seen 2 areas on release, kind of like how Genshin had Mondstadt and Liyue. But when exploring through both games for the first time, I had a greater appreciation for Genshin's views and surroundings, whereas less focus was placed on Star Rail's worlds, even though there's still a great amount of detail. Granted, Star Rail isn't and never was meant to be open world exploration, so I'm not penalizing them for neglecting that aspect, but the only incentive you have to explore an area is to find all the missing chests and maybe farm monsters. Genshin, on the other hand, alongside those activities in question, has a lot more value per square footage in a manner of speaking. You can realistically 100% your Real 6, for example, in a couple of hours, but for Genshin, it might take 10 hours or more to fully explore everything in a region, and the scenery is a sight to behold. Recently, some players have grown fatigued at miHoYo's insistence on exploration, especially with the deserts and underground caverns in Sumeru, but I think a lot of that has to do with there just being nothing but sand, dirt, and gravel everywhere. In contrast, if you were to check out all of the different islands of Inazuma, despite being just that, islands, Watatsumi Island has a very different landscape from Tsurumi Island, which is a different landscape from Seidai Island, which is a different landscape from Narukami. The extent of biome diversity spans into other areas as well, going from the frigid cold peaks of Dragonspine to the vast desolate labyrinth within the chasm. The game spares no expense at giving you every possible environment you can think of, and ensures that actual substance is put into each one instead of it being a superficial display. Star Rail tries its best to work with what it has given our inability to jump, glide, or climb, and they at least did a satisfactory job with incorporating as many explorative elements as they could. You're probably well aware of the funny interactions you can have with all of the garbage cans and dumpsters. But at the end of the day, exploration in HSR is limited, consisting primarily of rooms, hallways, and corridors, with the only real sources of interaction being enemies and the occasional treasure robots or puzzles strewed out in each area. To repeat, I'm not expecting a turn-based RPG to have open-world exploration as their primary focus, but it's an advantage that Genshin has over Star Rail. You're not just advancing from point A to point B to take on the next challenge. There are plenty of reasons to stop and smell the roses, take a detour, or explore new areas. On a region-to-region basis, I feel like players will remember Mondstadt and Liyue more than they will Eureka 6 and Xianzhou. I recall reading a comment from someone who mentioned that the 7 nations of Teyvat are connected to each other more thematically than Star Rail, which is worth covering. It was a nice treat to see Yaemiko take a trip to Sumeru, or Shinobu and Ito visit Liyue, or Klee, Venti, and Albedo visit Inazuma. On the other hand, I don't think Sela and Bronya will ever see Jingyuan and Fushuan given they're in completely separate corners of the galaxy. They compensate for that by having constant companions like March, Danheng, Welt, and Himeko, but it's just not the same. What I like about Genshin Impact is the satisfaction of areas you see far off in the distance being unlocked and explorable later on. I remember we were all looking at the vast mountains of Dragonspine and getting excited when we could finally go there and check them out. I'd even argue there's more fun to be had deviating off the beaten path the Archon quest put you on. Perhaps less so nowadays, but during the first couple months of the game, exploring Mondstadt and Liyue was such an immersive experience. One final thing before we move on, though I've expressed that bosses in Genshin really could stand to have more than just a wide circular arena, I love how domains and bosses are scattered throughout the world in specific areas, allowing you to survey the surrounding section as you reach or unlock those things. Star Rail, on the other hand, sorta just puts calyxes, stagnants, and corrosions right in the middle of previously explored rooms. Some may argue that the more condensed areas of HSR ensures for better pacing, which may be more appealing for some people. I did make a video on how exploration can at times feel exhausting or tedious. There's so much ground to cover that traveling through an area can get tiresome very fast, even if it's nice to look at. Then again, it lends itself to greater longevity overall. It bears repeating that exploration is mostly a difference in genre, but it's Genshin's main selling point for a reason. That links very nicely with the second thing. Side or optional content. This could be potentially implemented into Star Rail later on, but in Genshin, there's so many things you can do and places to check out that are seldom necessary to do so to progress through the main story. I say this all the time. One of my favorite events was the Three Realms Gateway Offering event featuring Enkanomiya. I can't remember the last time I visited Enkanomiya, but it was a very memorable time. The same applies to the aforementioned Dragon Spine. I don't think it's obligatory to explore through the Archon quest, but the two events involving Albedo breathed a lot of life into an area that you otherwise wouldn't have checked out. Conversely, Star Rail's existing side content is few and far between. To be fair, the game literally just came out and also doesn't have any flagship event running right now. I'm guessing they have plans to incorporate side content and optional areas as the game develops, but I seriously doubt they'll be able to match Genshin in this department. I myself don't partake in it, but they put a lot of work into the Serenity Pod despite being such a trivial aspect of the game. Narratively speaking, optional areas like Dragonspine and Konomiya or like half of Inazuma's islands don't even need to exist, but the fact that they do makes the game feel so much more substantial. Though I admit a lot of this is enabled by Genshin's overworld structure. This will probably apply to events too. Genshin's gameplay allows for more room for activity, as evident by how creative the events have been from time to time, particularly in the realm of minigames. I wish they could put the same amount of effort into endgame content, but I'll acknowledge that some of the flagship events they create every version are pretty enjoyable in small bursts. I don't anticipate Star Rail having the same complexity. I feel like it's going to go down the traditional gacha path where events come in the form of temporary dungeons or bosses that yield currency that you can exchange for time-limited stuff, or there might be raids, that's about it. All of those will mainly just be combat missions, but I may be wrong, maybe they have other things in mind. That said, it's not inherently a bad thing to go down that route. Star Rail doesn't have to copy Genshin. One thing I will say is, while Genshin's overall side content beats out Star Rail, I agree with the consensus that Star Rail's environments feel more alive and developed. I find it really endearing that you get small text messages from other characters every so often, and it makes them more memorable, but gameplay-wise, Genshin has them beat. The next thing Genshin does better than Star Rail is combat. This may be subjective on the basis of the two games having widely different battle systems, one being action RPG, the other being turn-based. Some may have a better appreciation for Star Rail's combat due to not being real-time and also having auto-battle, while others actively shy away from turn-based RPGs due to how repetitive it can be. I'm not particularly biased in either field, I like action and turn-based equally. That being said, Genshin's combat has more going for it. If I may speak freely, Star Rail's gameplay will get old. I could be proven wrong depending on how new content and characters are released, but as it stands, the range of strategy in this game doesn't extend very far. It's not a JRPG strategy game like Fire Emblem with a lot of factors in place and tons of planning required, nor does it have a comprehensive type matchup chart with different moves, strategies, and tricks you can employ in a game like Pokemon. 95% of your combat experience will consist merely of using your character's skill while you have skill points, and using basic attacks when you have none, casting your ultimates whenever available or necessary. You can't use items in battle, there's no universal combo system like how Brave Exvius' chaining. The gameplay is very bare bones, which has me worried. The beauty of turn-based RPGs is that characters have a wide list of things they can do. In Pokemon, you have 4 attacks you can use. In Octopath Traveler, you have a myriad of spells and attacks. This may be an incredibly off-the-cuff example, but a game series I'm a huge fan of is Mega Man Battle Network. It's not exactly turn-based, but the sheer amount of combos, strategies, and chips you can use makes it so no two battles are the same. It helps that HSR has auto-battling, so the game plays itself through tedious battles while you alt-tab and do something else, but you can only do so much with just 2 skills and an ultimate. It doesn't add that many layers to gameplay. You might think, how is that any different in Genshin? That game also has only a basic attack skill and ultimate. True, but its action RPG-centric nature, not to mention combat structures, has just a bit more depth to it. It's a known fact that Genshin's combat system has an insane amount of untapped potential, and unfortunately is kept that way because of the lack of intricate combat situations. That potential is what makes the game feel so enjoyable though, and it's building even more and more as MiHoYo constantly innovates with characters. Also, you can't really compare a skill from Genshin to a skill in Star Rail. An elemental skill in Genshin could come in the form of a decoy, it can be a movement ability, it can create structures, it can be a counterattack, it can do so many things. Skills in Star Rail so far have just been deal more damage, or deal AoE damage, increase damage of a party member, or inflict a status of some kind. Not much else. At the expense of sounding like a broken record, a lot of that has to do with the difference in foundations of a turn-based RPG and an action one, but all the more reason why transcribing Genshin's talents into HSR's traces was a bad idea. You kind of need more than just 3 action commands to make satisfying turn-based combat. Imagine if every Pokemon had only 2 attacks and occasionally could use a third, or imagine if in Yu-Gi-Oh! There were no spell, trap, or extra deck monster cards. You need more stuff to make turn-based combat last a long time. Speaking of more stuff, the mechanic that makes Genshin's 2-skill system work so well is of course how it conducts its elements. While I said in the first episode that HSR's class and element designation was better designed from a balance perspective, Genshin's reaction system is what's keeping the game alive for many players. A character is not just evaluated on their individual strengths, they're evaluated on their contributions towards reactions. It would be nice if they differentiated the reactions a bit more, instead of all of them just being damage with the exception of freeze and crystallize, but that has more to do with miHoYo not designing content that complements them. Elemental reactions have no shortage of issues, but it's better than nothing. Star Rail's weakness break is about as close of a comparison as they can get, and to be frank, it doesn't come close. Every character in HSR is judged by their individual merits, which can work for or against them. The idea that a character's usefulness depends only on how well they drive reactions in Genshin has made it difficult for niche teams like Mono Geo or Mono Elements in general to receive attention. On the inverse, it opens the opportunity for previously bad characters to be good. Kokomi Shinobu and Yaemiko started out mediocre, but the reactions and progression of the meta, they now have a place in one or many team compositions. Much of this is cancelled out by the fact that once again there's no content in the game that pressures you to diversify. Unless the target is explicitly immune to Dendro, you can just run Hyper Bloom or Aggravate against everything in the game and clear it no sweat. However, that doesn't mean there's no chance of that to happen. Presently, nothing in the game distinguishes a double Hydro team from a Taser team from a Dendro team. They're all just different ways to do damage. But there might be one in the future if miHoYo wisens up and starts making actual meaningful content. As a concept, elemental reactions have a wider range of possibilities than the element system in Star Rail, which brings me to my final reason. Genshin Impact has better long-term sustainability. From exploration to combat, the game's longevity is more promising than Star Rail. While in regards to user experience, Star Rail is a grade above Genshin, I feel like Genshin has a lot more substance to it that will make it last longer, and it has a ton of potential to develop even further if miHoYo chooses to. I guess to sum it up, Genshin has better concepts and likely will have the more enduring player base, but Star Rail has better execution. Not implying that Star Rail is gonna die or anything, and there's no rule saying you can only play one, but comparing games, I'd wager players will stick more with Genshin in the long run. Ultimately, it comes down to which game handles itself better. For all we know, miHoYo might continue to half-ass Genshin and kill off its player base while Star Rail takes over as the top game. These two videos are purely based on the titles as they are now. Things can easily change within a few months to a year, I'm certain of it. One last time, I made these videos in fun. Genshin and Star Rail are different games and are not meant to be compared as apples to apples. Depending on what preferences you have within a game, Genshin may be more appealing to you or Star Rail. Alternatively, you could just play and enjoy both for their own merits. In fact, I'm glad Star Rail and Genshin are similar in a lot of ways. If one ever gets boring or stale, I can focus more on the other and vice versa. They can help each other. What are your thoughts though? If you had to guess which game will outlast the other, what would be your pick? I'm on the side of Genshin, but I hope that both of them survive for a long time. But anyways, that's gonna be it for today. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. Consider following me on Twitter at Vars, joining my Discord server, and be sure to check out the first video on 5 things HSR does better than Genshin if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.